going to be in the gymnasium, the Glennie Gymnasium, and that begins at 2:30 this afternoon. It's my pleasure at this time to introduce the MC for today's program, a class of 1950. Please welcome Honorable James J. Nixon.
Thank you. As I came up here, it dawned on me that the last time I was on this stage was when it was affectionately known as the chapel, when it was at noontime every day, and when the pulpit was on that side, and I think it was 1948. It's been a while. It's a great opportunity for me and a real distinguishing honor for me to come back to Monmouth on our 40th class reunion and to meet with all of you, to see so many familiar faces, to realize that the worst part about coming back to a reunion is that nagging fear that you won't remember someone's name. But it is really as the biography suggested, and I hadn't seen that until this morning. It suggested that my wife and I felt we had been blessed many times, and we truly have. The biggest blessing in my life was my graduation from Monmouth College, and I like to think maybe the second biggest was coming back to be with you all today. We have a program that is scheduled to take approximately an hour, and it is done so in a way that each performance is allocated 8 minutes. So I would suggest if any of you are timekeepers, when you see 8 minutes have gone on, you can start to applaud and no one will really be too upset with you. As Drew indicated, I am a sitting judge, which means I'm still working at it. And I was thinking of what in the world could I ever tell people that happened in my life in any way would be of interest to them. And the only one thing I did think of, and this did in fact happen, was a victim of an attempted armed robbery who was a cab driver who worked just at night, was taken out of the police station because he had been the victim of an attempted armed robbery. And the police officers showed him some pictures. And as it happened, his name was Patrick Flynn. He had come over from Ireland about 30 years ago. And you know, they never lose their role. And the officer, the prosecutor said to him, "What did they do when you got to the police station, Mr. Flynn?" He said, "They showed me a lot of photographs." He said, "Did you recognize anyone?" He said, "Most of them." It says that they are of the class years of 1950, 1951, and it's interesting to note that all of them are of the class of 1954. That's all right. That's trying to prove, see if you really do read these. Esther Jones Bethel and Doris DuBois Slack and Sarah Landstrom Mateer will perform with you and perform with that great spirit of Monmouth College, Gracie Peterson.
After 40 years, we finally got
It's always very difficult for the following performers because it sets such a high standard for them to keep up. It really was very good. It was wonderful. Most importantly, it was less than 8 minutes. The second item on our program is Don Kettering, class of 1955, singing Count Your Blessings Instead of Sheep by Irving Berlin. And again, accompanied by Gracie Peter.
When I'm
some music from the South, featuring some of Stephen Foster's favorites.
I need to preface this because if you're trying to remember, did we ever see him in the college choir? Or did you ever see him in the music building? The answer to that, of course, is no. My voice was still changing when I was in college, and so I didn't realize that I might be able to use Tracy Peterson for a accompaniment, so I've got to check in a moment. We've got tape to accompany, but I'll be right back. I didn't realize being a musician was so complicated, so we'll be ready here.
Don't let me startle you. I'm just doing a rebel yell here to kind of kick things off, not only. That I am going to sing. Nobody else could be heard. Not half as much as me. Keep right going and let it part of me. That's just a game bow on the snare drum. Keep me a little rope on that Texas Avenue. Where I can find a diamond. Now you covered up Sparkle Like the Dew. One of the loveliest parts of the whole Texas city. Cover up the piccolo of that with a Rio Grande, with a Rio, where, whoop. See, my feeling is that, while I love a good snare drum, I feel that volume-wise it's just a little bit too much what you're doing now. See what I mean? Now you can try and hold it down, will you? Appreciate it. Where the Rio Grande, appreciate it. With a Rio Grande, slower, sorry, that's better. You go slow the rhythm. That's why I know that's so much better. I know that she remembers started long ago. You know that may have just a word of the difference. Mercy. Like a bright diamond,
We have now a medley of Beatles songs by Bobby Thompson Crassus and Fran Nickel Pittsburgh, both of the class of 1956.
If anything goes wrong, we have a wonderful ally. It's hard to rehearse over the telephone. It's hard. So we talked over the telephone. Yeah. This is our rehearsal.
city village. I guess she started out as a practicing attorney. So you get it right? These walls could only talk. 95 years ago, my grandfather graduated here and married David Wallace's second cousin. I didn't know that until this year. I've been getting into genealogy and learning all these little things. When my father went to school here and graduated in 1927, played saxophone in London College, where he sang in the Glee Club. There was an orchestra started on the radio in New York City, Paul Whiteman. And I didn't know until after I got married that I married his second cousin. The connections go on. When we were in college, sang a medley of tunes by George Gershwin and Courtney Best. I didn't know until this year that George Gershwin was Paul Whiteman's piano player. And that Paul Whiteman commissioned the writing of Gershwin's Rhapsody of Blue, which was performed in the first video back in 1927. But anyway, chorus line closed, of course, this year to rave reviews, 13 years of continuous performances. But back in the 50s, when we were studying our way through, getting ready to move on to bigger and better things, we hoped. I was the tour guide. The longest running show on Broadway back in the 50s was Oklahoma. So here we have a couple summers. You know, it's a bit here.
There's a bright golden haze on the meadow. There's a bright golden haze on the meadow. The corn is as high as an elephant's eye, and it looks like it's flying clear up to the sky. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I have a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way.
All the sounds of the earth are music. All the sounds of the earth are music. The breeze is so easy from Christmas tree, and an old music
Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my When I take you out tonight with me, honey, here's the way it's gonna be. You will sit behind the team of snow-white horses in the slickest freak you'll ever see.
Chicks and ducks and geese better scurry when I take you out in the Surrey. When I take you out in the Surrey with the fringe on top. Watch that fringe and see how it flutters when I drive them high-step sputters. Nosy folks will beat through their shutters and their eyes will pop. The wheels are yellow, the upholstery's brown, the dashboard's genuine leather. When it eyes and glass curtains, you can roll right down in case there's a change in the weather. Bright side lights blinking and blinking. You don't find your rig, I'm thinking. You can keep your rig if you're thinking that I care to swap for that shiny little Surrey with a fringe on the top.
Don't
Dean McIntyre is one for one.
A few weeks ago, I sang this number at a district Rotary meeting for their memorial service.
class of 1950. And I would have to tell you that I'm just very proud to introduce her to you now, being that she's from our class of that year, but also she's still filling our lives as she did then. All right?
I'm also a janitor. The Kappa Trio gave me 2 or 3 minutes because I'm a little loud. Can you hear me without the microphone? I'm terribly loud. I would prefer not to control my mic. Is that right? Anyway, I'm not a writer. I used to be a singer. I can't sing anymore. So I stole things from other writers and put it together. And this is for all you former Wee Scots. It's kind of a travel through time from a member of the class of 1950. First things first, I'd like to thank the writers I've taken as my own. Bedford, Bracken, Foster, Jones, Larrabee, Rust, Schulman, and Wise. That's how we used to call President Schulman. Sometimes it only takes a word, a look, or a ride on a once familiar road to make us recall our long ago. This time it was a road seldom traveled, the curving road to Monmouth College. It all began with one special time in my heart and head. The morning of the big day dawned, bright and clear. As the rosy fingers of the sun crept through my window, I could scarcely contain myself. Huzzah! I shouted, huzzah! I bounded joyously from bed. I ran to wake my mother. I called, "Mother, give me to eat." But lovable mother had anticipated me. She'd been up for hours while I had lain in drowsiness. She had slaughtered the brood sow and bustled out carrying morning breakfast. I came into the kitchen and my favorite breakfast was on the table. "Mother," I cried, "Ralston and Prowle suet! Just sit down and eat a slug of bed," she chided gently. "You don't want to be late for the first day in college." I stood that day and gazed at the campus, my childish face looking up, holding wonder like a cup, my little feet beating time, 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 to sort of rhythmic rhyme. All around me was the hum of happy men at work. There were masons building or aging a building so they could hang ivy on it. After we received our stylish freshman hats, the first activity we had was student gathering at the chapel. Instantly we loved our fatherly and St. Nicholasly president, Dr. Greer. He was a man of vision, and he knew what a future college president might say. "I am the very model of a modern college president. I'm always on the job, though nearly always a non-resident. I tour about the country to assemblies gastronomical and make all sorts of speeches, from sublime to broadly comical. I keep the trustees calm and the alumni all benevolent, restrain all signs of riot and publicity malevolent. I know the market value of each wage slave professorial and how much less you'll take for an honorarium tutorial. I mix with all the business kings, the lions and the rotary, of heiresses and oil tycoons. I am a hopeful votary. I use the phrase distinguished guest at every opportunity. I welcome all the alumni to my parlor every day at tea. I'm fond of giving dinners in a layout that is whimsical and talking to the students in accents quite untypical. So though I pile up mileage, being generally non-resident, I am the very model of a modern college president. Next, we all went to our respective faculty advisors. One of the guys saw an advisor, and his advisor said that his test indicated that his chances for success were greatest in a field where his family had some influence. My first class was 3 hours of Jesus with Howard Jameson. Surprisingly, the paths we trod more than 2 1/2 children, not putting the seat down on the toilet. I have sons. Bringing a baby to a public performance other than a bagpipe concert. And most of all, spitting anywhere, especially players on a televised baseball game. My friend Miriam, and I did some personal research on this, says she can still see in her mind's eye, in her 740 class, her pajama legs rolled up under her coat. A professor with a slight paunch and bright blue eyes leaning across the podium in mortal exasperation, yelling, "Look, I'm offering you $1 worth of knowledge and you're only taking 50 cents worth." She had another terrifying professor who said, "To ensure your undivided attention, I'm going to announce at the end of the class who is going to read their notes aloud." Much of our fun was outside the classroom. I remember when we played Knox College. They were bragging that their coach was a real winner and a real scholar with a master's degree. And we found out the subject of his thesis was, "What college done for me?" And then there was Gracie, our Gracie. After one of her fabulous shows at the theater, I raced up to her and said, "Oh, Gracie, did you see how my voice filled the theater?" And she said, "Yes, and I noticed a lot of people leaving to make room for it." Gracie may be getting a little older, but in her case, what we call it is youth part 2. Finally, we commenced, and on into the job market. With all I know about Mr. D.H. Lawrence, I visualize something literary, something full of pipe smoke and good English tweeds, where editors are stunned by my perception, and Nobel Prize winners, over martinis, confided their deepest Nobel Prize-winning thoughts to tender, reflective wise beyond my years' need. With all I know about Mr. Stanislavski, I visualize something theatrical, something with false eyelashes in them, where editors and directors were stunned by my perception, and all the leads, over martinis, said tearfully if only they had half the talent of stirring, memorable need. Instead of which, I am sharpening pencils and typing and filing and taking orders from my boss, hoping that someday someone will be impressed with all I know. Now, I have fallen in love. And his name is Ed. And he is against all my principles. He is not an older man. He likes his family. He eats his steak well done. He thinks the country is better than the city. But I've fallen in love, and so has he. He says I'm a nice girl, even though I live in Chicago. He says I'll make a fine mother. He says I will adore keeping house. This is not the image I intended. I never dreamed I'd end up marrying a man my parents would approve of. As the years moved on, I finished 6 pillows in needlepoint, and I'm reading Jane Austen. I don't have to struggle to find myself, for I already know what I want. I want to be healthy and wise and extremely good looking. I'm improving my serve as a tennis pro. I'm practicing verb forms in Greek. I don't have to ask what I'm searching for, since I already know that I seek to be good looking, healthy and wise, and adored and contented. I bloomed in organic gardening, and in dance I've tightened my thighs. I'm working all day and I'm working all night to be good looking, healthy and wise, and adored and contented, to be brave and well read, and bilingual, artistic, And I'm in charge of poison ivy and car sickness. And he's in charge of screwing. And then I want to become a women's liberation woman. And when it's vacation and he carries the suitcases and the playpen and I carry the totes, then I don't. And after dinner, when he talks to the company, well, I clean the broiler. And afternoons, when he invents the telephone and writes War and Peace, and I sort socks. And after he tells me that it's genetically determined that the man makes martinis and the woman makes the beds, then I want to become a member of the Women's Liberation Movement. And after I consider having equality and also having to change my own tires, then I want to do it. I like middle age myself. By middle age, I mean the years from 45 to 70. I took a little license there. This is the cocktail hour, or if one's persuasion is different, high tea. After that, you're not middle-aged anymore. You're dynamically mature. I turned 60 last year, but I prefer to think of it in Celsius. That's 16. Here we are in a time when restaurants are catering to seniors with a special menu at reduced prices. I stopped in one, and before taking my order, the waitress says, "Are you a senior citizen?" I bristle. I wanted food, not statistics. It's like asking, "How old are you?" She could come prancing up and say, "Oh, you're a senior citizen, and we got a surprise for you." Possibly the old cards on the table would be of answer. Just a pleasant, "Good evening. Would you care to admit to being 60? A 10% discount on your meal? Or would you rather lie about your age and pay full price?" Today, the circle comes round. What am I doing in midlife crisis? This morning I was 17. I've barely begun the pain, and it's good night, ladies, already. Well, I've been wondering who I'd be when I grow up someday. My acne has vanished, and it's sagging kneecaps already. Why do I seem to remember Pearl Harbor? Surely I must be too young. When did the boys I once clung to start losing their hair? Why can't I take barefoot walks on Broadway without getting a chill? There's poetry left in me still, and it doesn't seem fair. When I was thinking I was just a girl, my future turned into my past. The time for wild kisses goes fast, and it's time for Sega. Already?
Martha Godfrey used to say I throw too soon old and too late smart. That's a tremendous piece that she did. Our next piece is music from HMS Pinafore by Gilbert Sullivan and Hilda Beth Cox, Lucille Linda Hill, James G. Owen, Marshall Simpson, Carl Bassler, all in the class of 1940, and accompanied by Gene McIntyre Swanson, the class of 1930.
I have only one question. Where is Glenn Shaver when we need him? somehow whip this all in shape. Sometimes I almost expected him to say, if you don't conform, ye have our minutes. At any rate, we want to dedicate this little reminiscent performance to Glenn Shaver, whose spirit certainly pervades this auditorium. These were his haunts. Many of us were in his chapel choir and college choir. Sliver ahead. Also, I'd like to pay tribute to another gentle giant, Jaime Loboya, the instrumentalist, whose example and precept gave so many of us a love and appreciation for music that will last us all our lives. We'll never forget it, even all.
Free or
performance should be very proud. Done an excellent job. We have a moment now at which we go to that portion of the program which no program at Monmouth College would be complete without. That is Gracie Peterson being accompanying and Clarence Patterson, the class of 1935, and Gracie from the class of 1922. And we will sing the college hymn, the Flame of White and Crimson, and invite you all then to be at commencement in the gymnasium at 2:30.
Everybody on the program up on the stage.